Hey folks, Steve here with another Deadly Woods video. Here we are looking at turn 6 of the game, which is really the last turn that the Germans are going to have sort of the main initiative and momentum from their offensive, and from there on out. It'll really be mostly the Allies trying to break down the Germans, and they'll be, I guess, playing against the clock for the rest of the, you know, 5 or so turns of the game, or 6 turns rather, to do that, and we'll see just how well that works out for them. I had to correct at the end of the last video a pretty major goof up on my part that helped the Allies. I had units that had entered over here. I had moved them with the movement chit. They got involved in stuff over here. They should not have been allowed to do that. They are one of the units, set of units, a division that has to stay behind the Muse and then is released later for movement. So I had to correct that, and that meant that certain combats over here went a little bit differently, and the Germans didn't lose a step, and they basically are forcing the Americans back quite a bit. So, there's I don't know. It is what it is. You try to fix the mistake, and the game will continue on, and we'll see what happens. So we do have, now a number of units that are across the Muse. We have these guys, these guys, these guys, and these guys. The rule book just does say in a particular rules section that British units and the 11th Armor Division, and I think it's the 17th Airborne, have to stay behind the Muse until they're released, and it gives you the turns for the release. I think this is one criticism for the game, something that's easily changeable and fixable in the future. They really need to put an indicator on these units to remind you they can't move. Even if you try to remember, like, oh, all British units can't move unless they get released, like this guy did, it would really help to have something else on the counter help indicate that. Now you might say, well, Steve, it says in the book the 11th armor. Well, I mean, I'm not looking at that when I'm getting all stoked to move units forward and fight the Germans. I'm not, I'm too jumpy. But all they would really need to do, and I'll show you an example, is here's a unit from the 5th Armor Division. This has some special rules. It has a star next to its movement factor. These guys have to stay near entry point J on the map, which currently they are. Um, yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they're all within that restriction, but they have an asterisk next to their movement factor, which means, if you're going to go look at the unit and go, oh, I'm going to move this unit. Oh, there's a star. What's that mean? That's different than anything else I see on the counters. That's a good, helpful reminder. But it just saying the 11th division on the left-hand side of the counter, I mean, all counters, most counters, I shouldn't say all counters because there's a lot of exceptions to this rule. Most of the counters in the game all have a division designation on the left-hand side. There are some that don't, but many do. And you can't use that as your distinct marker because, 10th versus 11th, and if you're far enough away, you're not looking very closely. But that asterisk next to a movement factor would be enough to help um, remind you that there is something special about this unit. You better go make sure you know what it is. So that's one improvement I think that could be made to the game for that reason. To avoid mistakes like that, because boy, I felt real bad having to go back and figure out how to fix it because, I mean, the mistake mattered a lot. It changed combats over here. It made it better for the Allies for sure, but unjustly so. And I was able to work my way backwards, rewatching my own footage to figure out, how things had actually played out there. But by looking at the combat factors and going, well, if I got this result, then that means I rolled this on the die, and I worked it backwards, which is an interesting exercise, but not one that I want to do often. So these guys, kind of have a good possibility to continue to push back and take Neuchâtel. The Germans still pressing on Luxembourg, but it's going to be really tough for them to take at this point, nigh impossible. And then up in the north, the Germans were heading towards Eupen, and they just couldn't quite make it happen. They just couldn't quite get in there. And so I think for the moment the Germans have covered that area, but the Allies are going to have to decide: do they put their delay unit, into Eupen, or do they bring it down to New Chateau to help defend it? And that's a tough call because it could be that the Germans still try to bust a hole around Eupen and try to take it. I mean, it is feasible that they could try to do that. So it's going to be a tricky choice for the Allies. I'm thinking they will have to bring it down here just to make sure the Germans don't have an easy gimme for getting the unit on the board. Um, so there you go. Um, and let's see. We've got in terms of special rules for this turn 6. There's really not much. Basic reminders here that the U.S. player still gets to hold a reinforcement chit for this turn, and this is actually the last turn for the delay asset. So those are the only things we really need to keep in mind for this turn. Really straightforward, nothing too complicated. In looking at the chits for the turn, we can take a look at that very quickly. So this is the last turn where the Germans really get a good amount of stuff. Um, excuse me. They have their 3 formations chit, which is nice and flexible. We like that chit. Reinforcements, the supply checks, movement and combat as usual. And then we do have the 5th and 6th Army chits. We have to pick one like last time. So because the Germans control both Bastogne and Saint Sanvith, they get to pick one of these. I haven't decided yet. I do think that the 5th Panzer might be a good one because it allows us to focus on New Chateau again and try to take it and get ourselves a nice angle to operate in this area and extra push that we need. If we think the drive in the north is slowed down, we can focus on the center again. So I'm thinking maybe 5th, but I'm not super sure. The Allies get their reinforcement chits, the one held off in hand to be used depending on what chits get pulled, movement or combat. There are 2 chits for that. But the Allies do get one specialty chit. You have the Patton chit, or it can be played as the Monty chit. So something interesting for the Allies, and I want to make sure I read this right because it is kind of interesting. So on our action chit summary, we have this here. I'll just read it off for you to appreciate. The allied player must choose either Patton or Monty. If played as Patton, all U.S. Third Corps units may perform a move round followed by a combat round. So this is, it's like a specialty chit that we saw earlier in the game with the one German army or all Germans can move and attack. This is a version just meant for U.S. Third Corps, which there are some strewn about the map in different places, some in the center region, some in the south, but this would give that sort of a southern boost to the Allies, and they are well positioned near Luxembourg to make use of that. Alternatively, we could play it as the Monty side, and you can see there's even a Third Corps marker or symbol on here to show that for the Monty side. It is also similar looking there. If played as Monty, all released British units. So at this point, the Monty chit will get stronger over time because we don't really only have this guy over here as a released British unit, but released British units and the U.S. 7th Corps units may either perform a move round or combat round allied player choice. So it's not as it's in some ways it's I guess it's just different, right? Which style you want to go for? You want to do Patton style? You want to do it Monty style? Because it's a move or combat, but you potentially have a greater set of units that are involved. So to show what this looks like at the actual operational level, we have a lot of Third Corps units down here for Patton. We've got a few scattered over here just because I had moved them over this way from where they came in onto the board. We had a 10th infantry unit that had come up, got kicked out and around Bastogne. So really, it's do I want these guys to move and combat, right? Move and combat, that's powerful. Or Do I want any British units, of which there's only one, but there will be more later? And the seventh, uh, the seventh corps, which right now the vast majority of them are sort of in this middle section of the line here for the Allies in the northwest, or the middle of our diagonal line here. This area would get to move or combat instead of move and combat. So a little less flexible, but we're potentially activating more units, um, especially more units over time as more British units enter the board and can enter the game proper. And these guys would be focused on taking Saint-Vith. So if we get that chit, it's, do we spend some time getting closer to Saint-Vith? Or do we spend some time down here breaking the German line in the south and then trying to outflank the Germans from the south, which, I think either option has merit. Maybe right now it'd be better to use the Patton side until we get more British units unleashed. And then once those British are in, then we'll probably want to use the Monty Chit more. But it just sucks that it's move or combat as opposed to Patton's move and combat. So something to think about here. Due to the Germans still controlling 3 victory points or more, the Germans still have initiative, so it is up to the Germans to decide their first chit for the turn, and they'll need to decide what they want to do for that. So, yeah, I need to think through that as well. So, yeah, here you go, guys. A relatively long intro at almost 12 minutes, but just talking about another level set for the game. I need to think on what the Germans want to do there, but we do have the assets, the assets placement, and I think the engineers are going to stay in Luxembourg in the south. They're also going to stay here for the moment. And then the delay marker, I think we'll go ahead and put it into Neufchâteau. And then I think that's it for asset markers. All the other asset markers have really left the game. We definitely have artillery that everyone's going to be able to use, and that's really it. So, oh, I can't forget replacements either. That's something important. So let me take a look at the board and see where I want to put those guys. Okay, speaking just very quickly to where replacements went, the Americans got one armor replacement. They used it to flip this guy up to help defend down here. The Allies or the Americans also used 3 infantry steps to replace up here to kind of help hold the line up there. The Germans basically got 1 infantry replacement, and that was it, and I used it to flip this guy just to kind of help figure out a way to hold these guys back, but it's going to be pretty tough. The Germans need to. There's really 2 priorities the Germans have that they need to think about, in terms of this first initiative move that they're guaranteed to get. Do they do a movement to try to fix up this situation? Do they do a panzer activation and try to assault down here before these guys can come up and reinforce? It's that kind of tough decision. Like, where do you want your risk to be? And do you think you can hold on down here long enough to take care of this, then come back over here and do this? You can't do everything, so you have to pick your chits the right way. Now we could do something like a 3 formation shit and do a little bit of both. And there's that flexibility I mentioned that is nice. So I need to think through what I want to do with that. The 3 formation shit might be the preferred one right now, so that we could knock this armor back. We could fix some stuff over here maybe. Just not sure if that's what we want to do. So I need to think through that. I do tend to think the first chit played, whoever has initiative, that takes the most thought, right? You really need to decide, what do you want to be the first guaranteed thing to happen right now, knowing that your opponent may get the next chit, or you may get the next chit, or you may get the supply markers coming up. You really need to think through how that's going to happen. All right, let me go take care of that. Okay, so I used the 5th Panzer Army Chit. We didn't really make the headway that we needed. We did force these guys, which were out of supply, over the river with a DR result. We couldn't quite eliminate them, which is too bad. We tried to take Breton, but we got an AL1 result, so that's no good. And down here we got a BL1. So we had a pretty good chance of pushing these guys back out and through. It just did not work out that way for the Germans. So this was kind of a bummer of an action shit. They just couldn't do what they needed to do with just only the armor attacking, which is really all they had, because of the way the chit works. So yeah, it's a shame. Would have liked to have retreated this guy and then get some guys moved up, and then future chits we could have taken the victory city. But I'm thinking we're not going to be able to do that here. So we're going to go to the Chit Cup, and we're going to see what we get. Germans are realizing their automatic victory just is probably not going to happen this turn. And we pulled reinforcements. So the first Allied reinforcements this turn are going to be plentiful. Or at least pretty darn good. There's no getting around it. So we have, let's see, more of the Third Corps is going to come in at C. We're going to get some additional units either at B or C. B's got some stacking issues, so we may simply need to bring them in at the other C. And then in terms of movement, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and we get these guys going. Stacking is going to be a little bit of a problem, but I think we're okay like that. So just pushing north with a bunch of armor, the Third Corps is, and the Germans are going to be in deep trouble here very shortly. They're going to have to figure something out. They may have to start pulling back even at this point, just to be safe. I'm not sure when's the right time to do that, but there you go. I suppose that the armor that came in could actually attack. And of course, I split them up, which doesn't help. I guess the way to capitalize on this would be to have had this guy go here. Maybe have this guy go here. And then we would have ten to 3. Yeah, sure, why not? 14 to 3. Be 4 to 1. The DR results. Okay, so there you go. Okay, that's it for the reinforcement shit, and we will pull for the next one, and it is okay. Allied mover combat. Now we could make this the other infant reinforcement shit, but the thing is, the second reinforcement is units that are going to be locked for a while. So I think we need to use this as a movement or combat. Movement is probably going to be preferred here, so I think we are going to do allied. We are going to do allied movement. So let me work on completing that. The reason why I want to do movement is I need to get these guys organized over here a little bit better and set up attacks to hurt the Germans better. I need to get these guys shuffled in and protected properly. They just need to firm up the line and get things situated and make use of the gains over here in the given moment. So we'll be right back. Okay, here we are after the Allied move. I really focused on uh, trying to protect some of the areas. We could have had some nastiness happen where the Germans try to punch through here to get to Marche again, and so we're just sort of trying to rectify that. Got a bunch of units now piling in, wanting to watch out just in case the Germans try to get some infantry over the river somehow and start disrupting stuff over here, but um, there should be enough of defense. This guy will slow him down, and then we can move units around further in time. It gets a little tricky moving into this area now with congestion, but I think Neuchâtel is now protected by the Allies enough that the German offensive is really going to, they're not going to get anywhere. They've gotten as far as they can really get. Down in the south, you can see we are technically going to put the Germans out of supply on a uh, supply check because these guys sort of moved up. The infantry flanked around, and so there's definitely some danger of a stone being taken. So I think the Germans are realizing now that the southern sector, which they were so close to shutting down, and the fact that they didn't is having dramatic effect. Where it is this that's going to force the Germans to try to pull back and save their situation. So yeah, there you go. Um, okay, let me go to the cup and we'll see it. I believe the next chit has to be a German chit. And we get German reinforcements. Now, this turn, there's not many reinforcements. We get a couple of infantry regiments in M. And, gosh, what can they even really do? Do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Trying to come out to help. Okay, we'll go back to the cup. That's easy. Easy reinforcement. And we get the German 3 formation chit. 3 formations isn't a whole lot. So it's really going to be about what do we think we can achieve with this. Gosh, we might need to do an emergency withdrawal over here just to get safe. I have to see if I can do an emergency withdrawal with one of these chits. So let me think on this, the 3 formations. I think at this point it does look like the whole offensive of the Germans is kind of out of gas. There's nowhere they can really go. They're not going to be able to take Luxembourg as the Allies moved yet another unit in here to the stacking limit. And there's just no way that the Germans are going to be able to get over the river and through the town and the engineers to take it. So the Germans are going to have to decide now. They have to make a shift. Where are they going to try to make some stands, and how do they want to proceed from there? So yeah, I'll figure this out and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, in lacking a lot of obvious places to make moves that would be helpful, we ended up doing infantry and armor over here and finagled a way for some emergency withdrawals to occur that allows us to restore supply to these guys, but it's really rough, and there's obviously now this huge gap. The only benefit here being the Germans can go over these bridges potentially to escape, but that's, even that is kind of hard. So this might be the game that gets, this might be the deciding factor of the game. Me trying to save these guys might actually be a bad move, and they're in deep trouble. We still get a mechanized move, and to be honest, I don't know of one that really makes sense, so we might just have to give it up. I mean, I just don't know. Our few mechanized units where they are just aren't enough in a vacuum to operate well. So I think that's all we do. Unfortunately, I think the Germans are now realizing, like, okay, no more attacking this turn is going to do anything. So we need to start thinking about, like, how are we going to defend? We need the German move to come up, but now we have the uh, the Allied action, and it has to be an Allied action that happens next. And we pull up German supply. Okay, so one German supply is checked. Everybody is in supply, in some cases just barely. Um, and next we get the Monty or Patton shit. So uh, this is going to be a very important shit draw here for the Allies. This is going to be a game changer. So we can do movement and combat with the third, which would be the majority of these guys down here. That looks attractive. Or we do movement or combat with the seventh, which doesn't seem like a good idea. I think we got to have Patton do his thing and have movement and combat, and I think all this stuff is going to get blown apart massively to accommodate this. Absolutely, absolutely is going to be how we want to do this. So what's this movement going to look like? Well, we could have more of these infantry flank out around, start taking some of these bridges. Need to have this armor advance and start creating a bunch of retreat problems for this pocket of guys. And this couldn't have happened at a better time for the Allies. I mean, I made this move and I was thinking, okay, we ought to be able to kind of do okay with it, and the Allies are going to maybe get a move, but they won't do comp. But this chip coming up just makes this perfect for the Allies. So this is probably a really dumb move that I tried to save these guys. I probably shouldn't have bothered. But I would have been sacrificing 2 armor, and the same thing still could have happened, I guess. So I tried. I should have backed up earlier, maybe, is what should have happened. So this is going to be a nightmare. This is a nightmare for the Germans right now. Total nightmare scenario that needs to be addressed. So we're likely going to see a lot of this stuff get blown apart pretty massively. So I'll work through that, and we'll come back and we'll see the horrific aftermath. For the Germans, the Americans are going to have a happy day here. Move and combat for the third corps. Yeah, wow. They perform move and combat. Okay, here we are, and it's not as bad as I thought it could be, and it was because the Germans are still in supply. They were able to use artillery, though they've soaked up the use of a lot of their artillery for the turn. And the Allies could only really use their third corps artillery, really, here. And so we did some losses around here. We are still keeping them sort of out of supply. I guess the important thing is, while it's not perfect, we are threatening Bastogne. And what the Allies do need to do is clear this road, but they could be creeping up. The road is open to Bastogne. Supply problem, that's one issue, but it's certainly something that is now a major threat. The German line is essentially penetrated, so the bulge is potentially collapsing. So yeah, bad for the Germans with this move. Not the best rolls for this, but for the combats against the Germans, but we've put them in a pretty bad state here. So we'll go to the cup and we'll see what comes up next. We get German reinforcements here. We just get a couple of units infantry into K, which doesn't do us a whole lot of good. We could try to rush these reinforcements down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but that's not going to be near enough to get down there. Okay, and then we'll go back to the cup again, and we pull supply. So here we at last have the case where basically these guys are out of supply, adjudicated to be out of supply, and actually, so is this guy over here. So this is the first time we've had German units out of supply all game. That presents a major problem. This guy's out of supply because he can't trace over the river, and Zox and units are blocking the other paths. So yeah, these guys are in a bit of trouble here. We're gonna have to deal with that. Yeah. Okay. We'll go to the next chit, and it is German mover combat. Well, this one's going to be a tough call. We've not done either yet, and so I definitely think movement is probably a good idea at this point. If only to try to figure out how our line is going to be resolved and fixed with this disaster that's occurring right now. So this is probably what we're going to do. We're probably going to do movement and try to fix the situation. We'll see what we end up with. Okay, so here we are after the German move. Basically, I can't, until I get to move again, I can't figure out a way to save these guys for the moment, so they're kind of stuck. But I am trying to bring guys down to help create some defense, leverage these rivers, try to get control of the bridge ahead of them if I can. But this guy can't quite make it. And this guy's already over the river, so we need to try to get rid of him. These guys are trying to now figure out how they're going to hold the line over here. Now that the Allies have the opportunity to try to link up and counterattack. And we're starting to pull back a little bit, wanting to hold the bridge and just hold now Bastogne. That's going to be a real challenge. I'd like to defend further up, but I need to pull guys back just to cover over here. So it's like I have no choice but to try to pull back a little bit. So this, you could definitely say this is the turn that the Germans have to go on the defensive. And it's not going to take that much, I don't think, to really push them out of the way. And the Germans are going to be holding on for dear life onto what victory points they do have. And I don't think it'll be long before the Germans are in tough shape. This river line will probably be very important once they lose Houffalize, which I suspect they eventually will. Okay, so last couple of chits. I think the last chit has to be, or no, I'm sorry. The next chit is going to be, has to be the U.S. mover combat chit. I do wonder if maybe they should do combat and try to clear these guys out so they have a way to move forward rather than just move again. Until we knock these guys out, they've got nowhere to go. So I think we were going to try for combat. These combats are going to be, here, probably here to try to clear this guy. And then we'll see where else we want to go for combats. I'm not sure any places up here will be that valuable, but we'll evaluate that and we'll show the aftermath of that combat. Okay, here we are after the Allied attack. We forced a retreat over here, so he is still considered out of supply for the moment, but he had to retreat across. So they're sort of, they've secured this line. We didn't eliminate everybody yet, but we do have, we have eliminated a couple of units, and we've reduced, so these guys are pretty close to being smushed out. And then a few other scattered attacks in the north a little bit, where we tried, we got a BL1 here to start weakening Houffalize. We tried attacking over here, got an AL1 result, which was rather unfortunate, and then we forced a retreat over here, which wasn't a huge gain, but it starts to create problems for the Germans near Saint-Vith. So I think the Allies are feeling good. As of this turn, they've got the pressure against the Germans. The Germans have failed to achieve an automatic victory. They've just been, they just couldn't make it, and so now they're pushing in force. And really, I mean, when you think about it, like by the end of the game, we just need to push to take Saint-Vith and Houffalize, and that's enough to win the game for the Allies by the end of the next 5 turns. So I think the dramatic shift has definitely gone in the Allies' favor. It's just going to be a matter of, can the Germans do anything to slow things down? Can they fix their line? What can they do to avoid losing Saint-Vith and Houffalize, or even Bastogne at this point? So that's going to be the real trick here. And so the final chit, which for the Germans has to be combat, they can't pick anything else. I don't think there's much that they can do. If anything, they're going to do combats up here. They can't do anything over here, really. They could, at best, maybe cause a retreat, which they could try. I mean, it's certainly worth a try, but they're probably not going to get even that. And then elsewhere around here, I mean, I just don't think there's anything that they can really do. So it sucks. I'll evaluate. There might be some combats up here, but we'll come back with that being complete. Okay, yeah, so this was pretty quick. I had an attack up here, and I got an AL1 result due to rolling a 1 on the die, so not much I could do about that. And all the other combats that are feasible are just not good enough. And this is where all of a sudden, I mean, we really do hit a hard point. Doesn't matter where we attack, the Allies will almost always be able to put 4 more combat factors in due to their artillery advantage, and the Germans just can't risk taking any more step losses on attack because they're going to be even weaker as the game rolls on, and they're not going to be able to defend well. So I think that's really it. That's all they can do. And that leads us to the end of turn 6. Oh, I'm sorry. The very last chit, my bad. This still technically happens. The last reinforcement chit would be the last thing that happens in the turn. Now, for these guys, they're going to be locked. And so even if I want to do much with them, I really can't. So there's going to be, let's see, all these F3s. Great. So we get some paratroopers into G. They've got nowhere they can really go. And then we have some paratroopers that are going to go into E. And they're going to have nowhere to really go for the moment. And then we'll just mark them with the bingo chits. We do have 83rd Infantry that I believe are allowed to come onto the board. And so they would come in at G, and I think what we would do with them is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even like that, and get them into the board in a place where they'll be useful to counteract the Germans, and that is actually the end of turn 6. So yeah, I think the shift of the game, obviously not just because of the offensive initiative now going to the Allies going into turn 7, but the fact that they now have enough force that they can be realistically pushing on the Germans and taking the territory back. And when you really look at it, they need to take 1 hex here, so maybe 1, 2, 3 hexes may be needed to get it, and then we need to get punched through here to Saint-Vith, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, take a handful of hexes, and Bastogne remains under threat due to the actions of the Third Corps. So I mean, I definitely think as it stands right now, the Germans are going to be in some trouble. They're going to be fighting tooth and nail to survive. I think the Americans feel pretty comfortable with their ability to win, but we have to make it happen. And as you guys will see in the next video, the combat shit pool, or the action shit pool, doesn't really get great for the Americans, but they definitely will have the advantages, and the Germans will be much weaker in terms of the action shits that they have to operate. So yeah, there you go, guys. Turn 6, fun stuff. See you in the next video where we'll be looking at turn 7 and really starting the second half of the game with the Allies at advantage. Also worth calling out, if we were playing just the 6-turn scenario, the Germans would have lost. The Germans would win if they had 4 victory points. They had 4 victory points at various points in the earlier turns, but you would check at the end of turn 6 to see if the Germans had 4 victory points. If they do, they win. In this case, they did not. So if we were simply stopping here with a short scenario, the Germans would lose. I believe is the way to interpret that. If I look at this, look at the rules correctly, I'll just double check that really quick. The Germans win by controlling 4 or more victory point hexes that can trace a line of supply. And yeah, if they fail to achieve that, the Allies would win. So we would call this an Allied win on the short scenario. We're going to go ahead and play through the rest of the game to see how the rest of it plays, and then we'll see. I think it's interesting that so far we've not had any armor unit lose enough steps that we need to bring on the third counter, which is interesting. So those guys have sat there quietly, but I suspect we'll start to see them more as we get going into these next turns and the Germans really start to take more and more losses as we go. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take care and keep on gaming.